Hi, my name's Maribel. They said it was just a seating error, a policy misunderstanding, a mistake. But when your own sister pulls you out of first class in front of a crowd, and your mother calls, not to ask if you're okay, but to say you've embarrassed the good daughter, you start wondering, how many years did they spend rehearsing that silence? And if I never spoke up, how many more would they rewrite me out of the picture? What do you do when your family doesn't just forget you? They erase you on purpose? Would you have stayed quiet? It had been 5 years since I last saw her. 5 years without a call, a text, a holiday card. But the moment I stepped up to the first-class counter, holding my printed boarding pass like it was proof I deserved to exist, she recognized me. Darlene. Perfect hair, regulation uniform, name tag polished. She didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't even pretend she didn't know me. Economy lines over there. You're in the wrong place. No pause, no warmth, no hesitation. Just cold delivery. I stood there, holding my passport and ticket, dressed in a beige sweater and jeans. I knew how I looked. Comfortable, understated, maybe forgettable. Not high profile, not polished like her, but definitely not out of place in the first-class line. Still, the man behind me let out a half sigh. The woman with a designer bag gave me the once-over, and that familiar heat, embarrassment, started crawling up my spine. "I think there's a mistake," I said, soft enough that it almost sounded like an apology. Darlene didn't even bother to look at the ticket again. "No, there isn't." Her voice was neutral, but her eyes said it all. "Not you. Not here." I stepped aside, my throat tight, fingers curling around the edge of my ticket like it might suddenly erase what just happened. But this wasn't new. This was muscle memory. When I was 13, she convinced our music teacher I had stage fright. Got my solo reassigned. She told our neighbors I wasn't really into school because some kids just don't have that spark. She never raised her voice, never made a scene. She just removed me, quietly, efficiently. And every time, she made it look like I had misunderstood something. Now here I was, standing in the exact place I paid to be in, and somehow, still being told I didn't belong. She didn't ask why I was flying, didn't ask how I'd been, didn't ask if I needed anything. She just saw me and moved me out of her frame again. I walked away from the line. I didn't know where I was going, not really, just away. That's when a man, maybe mid-50s, plaid shirt, travel pillow slung around his neck, tapped my shoulder. "You okay, miss?" I nodded, not trusting my voice to do anything useful. I headed toward a quiet corner of the terminal, near one of those massage chairs no one ever uses. Sat down, still holding my boarding pass like a receipt for a refund I couldn't claim. Invisibility's a strange thing. You don't even realize it's been happening until someone looks right through you. And Darlene? She'd been doing it since the day I was born. But today felt different. Today, I had something she didn't know I had. Leverage. Maybe it wasn't just about her pretending I didn't belong. Maybe she'd built a whole system on people like me staying silent. And if that was true, then she had no idea what was coming. I didn't move far. A couple gates over, near the glass wall facing the runway, there was a bench open beside an out-of-order vending machine. I sat there just long enough to catch my breath, then made my way back toward the check-in area. If I left now, she'd win. And I wasn't in the mood to hand her another quiet victory. As I stepped back into the first-class zone, Darlene had shifted position, still at her podium, talking to a younger male agent. She was all smiles now, charming, efficient. But when she saw me approach, her face didn't just change. It dropped, like the act was too heavy to hold for more than a few minutes. I handed her my boarding pass. She didn't take it right away. She looked at it like I'd handed her a napkin with gum inside. "Maribel?" she said, tilting her head. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She narrowed her eyes, flipped the pass between her fingers, checking it like I'd stolen it. "This yours?" she asked, one brow raised. I nodded. She leaned in slightly, not to whisper, but to lower the pitch of her voice just enough so that it sounded like she was doing me a favor by not saying what she really wanted to say. Then came the line that hit harder than the first. Doesn't match the look. People around us shifted. One woman clutched her tote bag tighter. A teenage boy behind me half smiled, waiting for a scene. I didn't give them one. My lips pressed together. I didn't argue, didn't protest. But inside, I was taking inventory of every time she'd called me invisible with her eyes, of every room she had claimed by simply refusing to let me in. I glanced down at the counter, at the reflective surface, and saw myself. Not glamorous, not intimidating, just present. And that alone seemed to offend her. "My name is on the ticket," I said, voice level. "That should be enough." She didn't respond. She looked at the agent beside her, then at the queue behind me, and finally back at me. "We'll have to verify this. Please wait aside." There was no apology in her tone, no grace in her delivery, just procedure being weaponized. I stepped away, again. But this time, something shifted in me. I didn't feel smaller, I felt sharper. There's something about being consistently underestimated that teaches you patience, and something about being sidelined your whole life that gives you an extraordinary talent for watching people reveal themselves. I stood a few feet from the counter, not pacing, not fidgeting, just still, watching. That's when it hit me. She wasn't surprised to see me here. She was surprised I made it this far on my own, and maybe that scared her more than anything. See, when people disappear from your life long enough, you start inventing justifications for their absence. Not because you believe them, because the truth hurts too much to carry around every day. I used to think Darlene pulled away from me because we were just different people, different goals, different lives. But I see it now. I wasn't missing from her world. I was erased, on purpose. Standing next to me didn't fit the version of herself she wanted people to see. So she cut me out, quietly, strategically, just like she did with anyone who didn't polish her reflection. A few more people boarded. The line moved on. I could hear her voice again, cheerful now, smooth, fake as dollar store perfume. Then, suddenly, louder than necessary, "We'll have to verify this, please wait aside." Like she needed everyone to hear it one more time. I nodded. "Of course," I said. My voice came out flat but clear. She questioned my identity in front of strangers. Loudly, with purpose. But I wasn't angry anymore, just aware. The question wasn't whether I belonged. The question was, how long would I let her keep pretending I didn't? I didn't move much after she told me to step aside, just stood off to the side of the gate, where the glare from the terminal windows couldn't quite reach. My boarding group was already on its way in. Suits, watches, voices that never lowered when talking about business. And there I was, standing alone with a ticket I'd paid for and a name that apparently didn't match the look. The gate agent began scanning passengers in groups. The same scanner that had just confirmed my seat, my flight, my identity. Green light. But it didn't matter anymore. Because it wasn't about the scanner, it was about her. I waited. Tried to calm the beat of my heart the same way I used to calm myself during fire drills in school, by staring at something fixed and breathing through my teeth. Then they called the final boarding group. I stepped forward again. No fanfare, no confidence, just quiet resolve. I held my boarding pass out, let it scan. That familiar tone chimed. The light blinked green. I started to walk. But before my second step, I felt a hand, light but firm, wrap around my arm. "Excuse me, ma'am," Darlene said, the edges of her smile sharp as paper. "I believe there's been a mistake." I pulled my arm gently away. It scanned green. "I'm aware," she said, keeping her tone just low enough to sound professional. "But you're not on the first-class manifest. I need you to step aside." People turned. Not all of them, just enough. The couple from earlier. The man with the Rolex. A kid with earbuds in but one eye on us. I stared at her. "My name is Maribel Trevors. That's my seat," Darlene's mouth moved, but it wasn't speech, it was calculation. Then she spoke louder this time, deliberately over-articulating. "You're not on the manifest for first class. Please step aside." Now everyone was watching. My fingers tightened around the strap of my tote. I could have reached into it, pulled out the email confirmation, opened the app, called over a supervisor. But the deeper truth was harder to explain, and more humiliating. She knew I belonged on that list. She'd seen the manifest before I ever arrived. She just didn't want me in that cabin. Not because of protocol, but because of proximity. She needed to make sure everyone there knew that she, Darlene, the respected senior flight lead, was nothing like the woman in the beige sweater with scuffed flats. Behind me, someone whispered, "This is ridiculous." A few chuckles. A sigh. I looked down at my ticket again. It hadn't changed. Neither had my seat assignment, only her willingness to let me claim it. I looked up, found her eyes. She didn't flinch. I gave the pass to the other attendant, who was standing slightly behind her, uncertain. She looked younger, early 20s maybe, new, the kind who still asked questions silently with her eyes. I didn't say anything, I just nodded once. Then I turned, walked down the bridge, not toward first class, but to the back. The long walk, past rows of narrow seats, legs spilling into aisles, overhead bins already full, and no room for anyone like me to be angry. My seat was in the rear half of economy. A middle seat, ironically. I placed my bag overhead, sat down, and buckled in with fingers that felt disconnected from my body. People around me barely noticed. Someone coughed. A woman flipped through a travel magazine. The hum of the plane filled the space like a curtain, shielding me from the world I wasn't allowed to be part of. That was the moment it sunk in. Not the seat change, not the whispers, but how fast and easy it had been for her to do it. No hesitation, no apology, just another deletion, masked as procedure. She didn't just move me, I thought. She erased me, and no one said a damn thing. Out of the corner of my eye, the younger attendant passed by. She glanced at me, briefly, but said nothing. Just kept walking, lips tight. Then I heard it. 2 rows up, 2 voices. Low, but not quiet enough. Did she just pull her own sister out of first class? My breath caught. They knew, they all knew. And they let it happen anyway. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew exactly which voice said it, and I knew what they meant. Some people whisper because they're afraid. Others whisper because they enjoy watching someone else fall. That kind of whisper, it leaves a mark. I leaned into the window, pressing my fingers lightly against the cool frame. Outside, clouds moved slow and silent, like they didn't know what just happened. Or maybe they did, and they were just tired of reacting. The woman in the aisle seat beside me was flipping through a crossword book. Not once did she look up. Maybe she was being polite, maybe indifferent. I didn't care either way. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. I just needed stillness. They always say the worst pain is silence, I thought, watching the wing slice through sky. But it's the silence that comes after someone makes you disappear that cuts deeper. 30,000 feet in the air, and I felt more grounded than I had in years. Because now, I knew what I was up against. Darlene hadn't just hurt me. She'd made me disposable, and she didn't have to raise her voice or call me names to do it. She just used the tools she'd always used. Control, performance, and the sharp edge of professionalism that made everyone else think she was doing her job. No message, no apology, nothing from her. Of course not. She'd spent her entire adult life pretending I wasn't there. Why would she start seeing me now? I pulled out the travel wallet in my bag and flipped through the flap, where I usually kept receipts and half-used coffee punch cards. Tucked inside was an old Polaroid, faded now, edges curled, colors warped by time, but I still knew what it was. Me, in a pale blue secondhand dress, standing outside my high school gym on graduation day. My parents flanking me awkwardly, arms stiff, smiles forced. And on the end, Darlene. her smile broader, her stance perfect, like she belonged in a brochure for sibling harmony. I used to keep that photo on my dresser. For years, it was the only evidence I had that we'd been in the same place at the same time. Just once. Then one day it was gone. I found out weeks later. Darlene had gone through the family albums and reorganized them. My photo never made it back. When I asked her where it went, she didn't blink. "It didn't fit the theme," she said, like I was the mismatched napkin at a catered event. I stared at that photo now, back pressed into the thin airplane seat, knees grazing the tray table. I thought about how many times I'd asked for space in her world, only to be told I was asking for too much. But I wasn't. I wasn't asking to be the center. I was asking to be counted. There's something about family that makes the cuts feel deeper. Strangers can hurt you, but family makes it personal, and then tells you it wasn't. They call it teasing. They call it just how she is. They call it keeping peace. She edited me out long before I ever took up space. I whispered to no one, as the seatbelt light dinged overhead. I glanced at the dark screen of the seatback in front of me, catching my reflection. Tired eyes, lips set, chin higher than I expected. "I used to think she resented me," I said under my breath. "Now I think I just didn't match the story she was telling." And instead of rage, I felt a strange, quiet clarity settle in. I didn't need the photo anymore. I didn't need her to hand me anything, not recognition, not regret. I knew I was there, and I remembered. That was enough. A few rows ahead, a crew member made her way down the aisle. She paused near my row. Not long, just long enough to hover. Her gaze lingered. Then she moved on. But as she passed, I heard her murmur low, just loud enough for the back of my neck to catch the weight of her words. "I'd never treat my sister like that." She didn't say it to me. Maybe she didn't even mean for me to hear. But I did. And just like that, I realized someone had been watching. Maybe more than one. After the murmured words from the passing crew member, I stayed still for a moment longer. Then I quietly unbuckled my seatbelt, gathered my things, and made my way to the rear lavatory. I didn't rush. I didn't care if the occupied light turned red behind me. I needed space, any space that didn't remind me of how small I'd been made to feel. Inside, I locked the door, placed my tote bag on the closed toilet lid, and pulled out a notebook. It wasn't fancy, just a soft, leather-bound journal I'd been carrying for years, mostly untouched, pages still stiff with the kind of hesitation that only silence builds. I flipped to a clean page, gripped the pen tighter than I meant to, and started writing. "You've never said my name in public, Darlene. Not once." I stopped, let the sentence sit, the ink still wet, and then, in my head, a flood of memories began rolling in without warning, so fast and sharp I couldn't stop them if I tried. I remembered our cousin's wedding, how Darlene introduced everyone at our table by name, pausing for anecdotes, funny comments. When she got to me, she said, "This is my sister," with the same tone someone uses to introduce their tax accountant. No story, no laugh, not even a proper name. I remembered church picnics, where people would ask, "Is that your sister?" And she'd shrug. "She's the youngest." At a family reunion one summer, a neighbor asked how many siblings she had. She smiled and said, "Just me and my brother. The middle child is more of a mystery." I should have said something, but I didn't. I was taught not to make things uncomfortable. But here's the truth. Silence isn't neutral. It's participation. I leaned against the sink, journal still open, pen hovering. She knew my name. She just didn't want to give it air. Because names carry weight. They demand recognition. They make people real. To her, I wasn't useful as a sister, only as a prop. A blank space she could fill however she needed depending on the room. I used to think maybe she was just forgetful, busy. Maybe she didn't like the sound of my name. Maybe she was protecting me from something, embarrassment, awkward questions, whatever. But that was me being generous. That was me doing the emotional math to explain someone else's subtraction. No. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was strategy. She didn't want me to be someone. She wanted me to stay convenient. And the more invisible I stayed, the more spotlight she got. The more her version of the story solidified. I put the pen down and stared at what I'd written. The thing about being erased is that eventually you stop trying to be seen. You start building your world in the shadows. And sometimes the shadows teach you how to shine alone. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. I closed the journal slowly, pressing the cover down like sealing something sacred. Someone knocked gently on the door. "Ma'am?" a soft voice said from outside. "Someone just asked about you." I didn't move. She said, "She's your sister." Of course she did. Now that there's an audience again. I left the lavatory, ignoring the curious glances as I returned to my seat. Darlene didn't follow. She wouldn't. Not without a witness. And certainly not without the right lighting. The cabin had shifted into that quiet lull that comes after a meal on a long flight. Shades down. Passengers either half dozing, watching silent movies, or flipping through those tired, laminated catalogs of overpriced junk. I leaned back, tilted my head toward the aisle, and closed my eyes, partly to rest, mostly to listen. From just behind the galley curtain, 2 flight attendants whispered in the kind of hushed voices that people use when they think no one's paying attention. They didn't know I was awake. Or maybe they did. People like me have a tendency to blend in, until we don't. "She flagged that guy with the stained jeans last week," one said, barely above a breath. "Said his face was off-brand." The other chuckled. "Classic Darlene. The Darlene system. Rank 'em by look, then reshuffle as needed." I kept my face still, body calm, like someone in light sleep. But inside, my mind locked on every word. Off-brand? System? This wasn't just about me. It was about control, visibility, who got seen and who got shuffled. Darlene didn't just push me out because she could. She'd built a pattern, one that relied on silence and complicity, one that looked a lot like policy, but wasn't. I stayed still, absorbing each syllable like it was testimony. They didn't say my name, but I heard hers. I heard the laughter, the certainty. She didn't climb the ranks because she was excellent at her job. She climbed because she knew how to curate a narrative, one that made passengers feel they were paying for an image, and she'd make sure that image stayed clean, polished, white, thin, unthreatening. I opened my eyes slightly, scanned the cabin. The older black woman who'd boarded with me? Gone. The Latino man with the sleeve tattoos who'd been ahead of me in line? Reassigned. And me, seated in the back row, middle seat near the galley. This wasn't about performance. It was about optics. I took a breath through my nose, slowly. Let the truth settle. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out the same journal from earlier. Not for a quote, not for a poem. This time, I opened to a fresh page and started a list. Flight 287. Passenger, moved after check-in, staff names. Not yet confirmed, conversation overheard. Rank 'em by looks. My handwriting was fast but steady. It felt less like journaling and more like building something. A case, maybe, or a weapon. This wasn't about Darlene and me anymore. This was about a system she'd been allowed to build, unchecked, because people like me assumed we were alone. And maybe that's how systems like this survive, by isolating their targets just enough to make each one think they're the outlier. But I wasn't alone, not anymore. I stared at the ink drying on the page. The weight of it all didn't crush me, it sharpened me. If a system benefits from silence, I wrote beneath the list, then noise becomes a form of justice. The lights flickered slightly as the crew prepared for descent. I clicked the pen closed, tucked the journal into the seat back pocket, and reached for my water cup. Just then, a younger flight attendant passed. She didn't make eye contact, didn't break stride, but she slipped something into my hand as she moved past. A folded napkin. I opened it discreetly beneath the tray table. One sentence, scrawled in pen. "You're not alone. I've seen it too." I read it twice. Then I folded it back up and placed it next to my journal. The plane had begun its slow descent, window shades still drawn, cabin dim, the kind of stillness that only comes when people are too tired to pretend they're not exhausted. I sat upright now, tray table up, hands folded on my lap like I was waiting for a verdict. I kept glancing at the folded napkin beside me. I didn't need to read it again. I'd memorized the slant of the handwriting, the way the words curved like they'd been written in a hurry, but with care. You're not alone. I've seen it too. There was comfort in that sentence, but also weight. Because if someone else had seen it, that meant more had, which meant no one said a word. A rustle passed near my shoulder. The younger flight attendant from earlier returned, this time with the breakfast cart. Her eyes met mine just briefly, then shifted away. As she moved down the aisle, she paused, turned back, and silently mouthed something. I couldn't catch it, not all of it, but I saw the shape of one phrase. Not the first. My stomach flipped. When she circled back, she slipped something else into the side pocket of my seat. Not a napkin this time, a folded safety card. I waited until she passed to reach for it. Inside, scrawled in a different hand, cleaner, more practiced. You're not the first. We've seen her do it. We just didn't know she'd do it to family. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt shifted. This was bigger than humiliation, bigger than her voice calling me out in front of a terminal full of strangers. This was a pattern, and I wasn't just a casualty. I was a witness now. I stared ahead, into nothing. My thoughts leapt to someone I hadn't considered in years, Simone. She worked the JFK route for nearly a decade. Always early, always over-prepared. She vanished after a minor altercation with a passenger, or so I'd heard. They said she retired early, I remembered telling someone. But Simone was 39, no kids, no spouse. She wasn't the type to disappear. She was the type to challenge things that didn't sit right. And Darlene? She hated that. She didn't retire, I whispered. She was reassigned, quietly, just like always. The plane dipped lower. Seatbelt signs dinged. I pulled out my notebook again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I flipped back to the list I'd started and underlined the words, Flight 287 twice. Then, I turned the page and wrote across the top. Names, incidents, times. Underneath, I began. Simone L., JFK crew, Flight 217, May 2021. Reported for passenger escalation. Removed final message. They made it clear, speak and disappear. I didn't know where this list would go. I just knew it needed to exist. Some people post screenshots. Some speak to cameras. Me? I build timelines. Some people scream into microphones. I wrote in the margin. Some build dossiers. I paused, staring at those words. I've always been better at the second. As the landing gear dropped beneath us with a thump, I clicked my pen shut and slid the notebook back into my bag. I didn't feel brave, not exactly, but I felt ready. That's when another voice, a different one, lower, older, bent close beside me as he passed. It was the senior flight attendant, gray at the temples, calm in his posture. He didn't stop walking, just kept going and said, under his breath, I just want you to know. Some of us are waiting for someone like you to say it first. I didn't answer. I didn't nod. But I did close the notebook again, slowly, with both hands. Not like I was hiding something, but like I was sealing it. Then I'll be the first, I whispered, but not the last. By the time I stepped off the jet bridge and into the terminal at O'Hare, the early morning light was breaking through the skyline in streaks of steel and amber. Most travelers were still blinking sleep out of their eyes, dragging bags and kids and bad tempers through security lines or toward coffee kiosks. But me, I walked with a purpose. No stops for baggage claim, no glance toward ground transportation. I turned left out of the gate and took the elevator up to the first-class lounge. It was half full, quiet except for the low hum of TVs and the occasional clink of a spoon against ceramic. I chose the corner booth, farthest from the windows, but still facing the tarmac. I wanted space, but I also wanted visibility. Strategic, not emotional. I didn't need pity, I needed momentum. I pulled out my iPad and started typing. Subject, Flight 287. Immediate concern, body. I've seen enough. Please arrange a meeting room at HQ, today. Maribel Trevors, strategic owner. Tier 1 Aviation Holdings. No fluff, no background story. I knew what I was doing, and I wasn't giving them time to pretend they didn't know me anymore. For a moment, I stared at the screen. Not out of doubt. Just to feel the power of that last line. My name, followed by a title Darlene had spent years pretending didn't exist. I hit send. There's something precise about knowing your words will land exactly where they need to. No hashtags, no tears. Just a clean directive with consequences folded inside. I leaned back slightly, letting the hum of the lounge settle around me. Businessmen dozed with neck pillows. Someone was video calling their kid. Over near the window, a woman in a navy dress tapped on her MacBook like she was editing her life in real time. I remembered another time I hit send, years ago. A formal complaint against our former COO, a man who was careful about where he placed his hands and which jokes he told depending on the room. No one thought he'd be removed, but I didn't need belief, I needed proof. And when I gave them that, he was gone within a week. I hadn't spoken at that meeting either. I just laid the file on the table and waited. Some people think justice has to shout, but sometimes it just arrives. On time. In writing. You didn't say a word, a voice said behind me. I looked up. It was the older flight attendant from the plane, the one who'd passed me with that subtle comment before landing. He didn't sit, just hovered near the edge of the table. But I read the silence, he added. I won't be silent much longer, I said, folding my hands. He nodded slowly. We'll back you, just say when. I gave him a small smile. It wasn't victory. It wasn't closure. But it was the first moment in a very long time that I didn't feel like I was speaking into a vacuum. He walked away without another word. For the next few minutes, I just sat there, letting the quiet settle in a way that felt earned. I took one last sip of the too bitter lounge coffee, closed the iPad, and checked my phone. New message. From HQ. Subject. Confirmed. Meeting room 214. Body 11:30 a.m. We've heard things. This isn't just about Darlene anymore, is it? I stared at the words. This isn't just about Darlene anymore. No, it wasn't. Not since they moved the old woman in the aisle seat. Not since Simone vanished off the JFK route. Not since I realized Darlene's weapon wasn't her voice, but the silence of the people around her. I tucked the phone into my blazer pocket, stood, and adjusted the strap of my bag. Justice wasn't a concept anymore. It was a calendar invite. I walked through the terminal like I'd done it 100 times before, shoulders squared, steps even. But this time, I wasn't heading toward a gate. I was heading toward a room where people used to speak about me as if I wasn't in it. That would change today. A staff member in a navy vest met me at the lounge entrance. He didn't ask for my ID. He didn't ask who I was there to see. He just nodded once and said, "Follow me." The hallway they led me down was quiet. White walls, frosted glass doors, the faint scent of lemon cleaner and stale coffee. We turned left, and I saw it. Conference room 214. My name was already on the screen outside the door, but I didn't go in right away. Through the glass, I saw her. Darlene. She was standing near the beverage counter, holding a paper cup with both hands, talking to a junior coordinator, like she was conducting a charm seminar. Her voice carried just enough for me to catch the end of a sentence. It's always about perception. Some people just don't carry it well. That's when he arrived. A man in his 40s, pressed suit, earpiece tucked behind one ear. Floor manager, probably. The kind that makes decisions with a glance. The kind Darlene usually wrapped around her finger in under 5 minutes. He walked in without knocking. "Ms. Darlene?" he said, not raising his voice, not even glancing at the junior. You just insulted the boss. Everything stopped. The paper cup in her hand tilted slightly. Her jaw moved before sound caught up. Excuse me? She said, with that smile she always used when she was pretending something was funny instead of offensive. I think there's been a misunderstanding. He didn't blink. No, I don't think there has. He gestured toward the corner of the room. That's when I stepped inside. Slowly, quietly, but with full presence. Darlene turned. She saw me, and for a half-second, I saw it. Realization, then denial, then the flicker of panic she always tried to swallow. Maribel? Her voice broke around the edges. That's the first time you've said my name aloud in 10 years, I said, without raising mine. She took a step toward me. I had no idea you were... Why didn't you say anything? We could have... If someone needs a title to be treated with basic respect, I interrupted, they're not worth the respect in return. No one moved. The coordinator, who had been standing beside her, took a small step back. She looked at Darlene like she was seeing a crack in marble for the first time. Darlene looked around the room, as if searching for someone, anyone, who'd step in, save her, speak for her. But the silence was airtight. She started again. If I had known. This isn't about what you knew, I cut in. It's about what you built, what you got away with because no one pushed back. Her mouth opened, closed. The floor manager tapped something on his phone. Looked up. The board just confirmed. They'll be reviewing your entire conduct record. Effective immediately. That's when she really saw it. The point of no return. She looked at me, voice smaller now. I didn't know it was you. I took a breath. Held it for a moment. Then let it out slow. That's the problem, I said. You only act decent when it is. And I turned. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't need it. Because this time, I was the one deciding who stayed in the room. The morning sun crawled across the hotel carpet like it was in no rush. I wasn't either. Not until my phone buzzed so hard it nearly slid off the nightstand. 32 missed calls, over 500 notifications. A text from Ellery. Brace yourself, you're trending. I opened my inbox. Then Twitter. No, X, now. The video played before I even touched it. Darlene, in full uniform, standing straight-backed at the gate. Her voice clipped, clear. You're not on the manifest for first class. Please step aside. And there I was, visibly confused, holding my boarding pass, stepping back. The caption read, Flight attendant removes woman from first class because she doesn't look the part. The video had over 2.3 million views and counting. Thousands of comments. Reposts with headlines like, Corporate bias in the skies, and, She bought the ticket. She owns the airline. One pinned comment said, They judged her by her clothes. Turns out she owns the plane. I watched it twice. Not because I enjoyed seeing myself, but because for once, people weren't seeing the version of me my sister curated. They were seeing me as I was. Calm, stunned, and standing my ground in the face of someone who'd trained her whole life to erase me. TV anchors were debating it now. Split screens. One side defending standard procedure, the other calling it what it was. Aesthetic discrimination. On a talk radio clip someone forwarded, a caller said, If you look like a certain type, you get treated like you paid less, even when you paid more. I couldn't argue with that. I scrolled until my thumbs ached. Most comments were supportive, some confused, a few skeptical. The usual digital mix. But then I saw it. What cracked something open inside me. A repost of the video with a side-by-side. On one side, the clip of Darlene removing me. On the other, my LinkedIn profile. Title, Strategic Owner, Tier 1 Aviation Holdings. The internet had connected the dots faster than HR ever could. I didn't have to tell them I belonged. They saw it for themselves. A chime. New message from Ellery. Subject. We found something attached was a PDF. Internal email. From Darlene P. 2. Cabin crew. Image control committee. Subject: Cabin image protocol. Excerpted lines. First class is our face-forward branding. Avoid overweight, underdressed, or tattoo types. Adjust seatings if needed. Be subtle. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just something she thought. It was something she wrote, something she circulated. She hadn't just acted on bias. She'd institutionalized it. I read it again, slower this time. It wasn't an attitude, I whispered. It was a documented system. Suddenly, everything snapped into place. The reassignments, the people quietly shuffled, the subtle power moves disguised as professionalism. She'd created a culture where exclusion felt like order. I set the tablet down, stared out the window. Chicago's skyline looked jagged, sharp, appropriate. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number, text. I was pushed out for not enforcing that protocol. If you speak, I'll back you. I have logs. I sat up straighter, reread the message. It was happening. One voice becomes two become 20. And eventually, it becomes undeniable. But before I could even respond, another notification flashed. Incoming call. Mom. I didn't need to guess what it was about. She wasn't calling to ask how I was, or to say she was proud. She was calling because I'd embarrassed her other daughter. I let the phone ring twice before I answered. Not because I was hesitant, but because I already knew how this would go. I wasn't preparing for impact. I was bracing for the familiar rhythm of guilt dressed up as concern. Is it true? She asked the moment I picked up. No greeting, just sharp. Did you make that scene public? I stood by the window of my hotel room, still in the clothes from the day before, watching the glow of early evening turn the skyline amber. The TV played on mute behind me, flashing clips of news anchors and headlines about airline bias and corporate conduct. I didn't make anything public, I said. It went public because people saw it. She exhaled in that slow, judgmental way she used to when I brought home report cards with anything less than an A. You've embarrassed your sister, she said, her voice tightening. She's worked so hard to get where she is. All these years. Don't you think she deserves a little grace? I blinked. That's what this was. Not concern for me, not even curiosity, just damage control for Darlene. So did I replied quietly. You should have spoken to her in private. You could have handled this without spectacle. Spectacle? I echoed. She pulled me out of first class, in front of a full gate. That was the spectacle. You're twisting it. No, I'm naming it. She paused, then tried another angle. More cutting, more maternal. Family doesn't air its laundry in public. And family doesn't drag their own blood out of a cabin like they're smuggling shame. I said flatly. Silence. Not the kind that heals. The kind that waits for you to recant. To feel small again. I didn't fill it. You've always had a problem with Darlene's success, she said finally. Ever since she got promoted. Ever since people started respecting her. She earned respect by cutting people out of the picture, I snapped. She built her story by making sure I had no voice in it. I'm not doing this with you, she muttered. You already are, I said, then paused. But not for long. The tone shifted. The kind of shift that happens when a parent realizes their child isn't asking for permission anymore. You've made your choice then. No, I replied. She did. I'm just finally responding to it. There was one last attempt. Just think about how this looks. I looked at my reflection in the window. Tired, maybe, but upright, still standing. I have, I said, for most of my life. She didn't answer, not immediately. And when she finally did, her voice was small. Do what you want. Then the line went dead. I held the phone to my ear for a second longer than necessary, then set it down gently on the windowsill. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't sting, but because I'd already bled out from this wound a long time ago. All she did was open a scar I'd stopped pretending would heal. And yet, there was peace in that too. My phone buzzed again. No name this time, just unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? A woman's voice came through, steady and deliberate. Older, worn. I used to work under her, she said. No need to specify who. We both knew. I've got documents, screenshots, statements. I've been waiting for someone like you. I didn't rush to speak. I let her words fill the room. Thank you, I said. Let's talk. After the call ended, I walked the 2 blocks from the hotel to a quiet cafe on the corner, the kind with brick walls, good lighting, and baristas who don't ask questions. I slid into a booth facing the window, set down my coffee, untouched, and opened my phone. Notifications were still flooding in, news alerts, mentions, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. But one stood out. A video link from Ellery, marked only, "Thought you'd want to see this?" I tapped it. The clip opened to a familiar face, Darlene. Flawless as always. A single tear tracked the edge of her eyeliner. She sat across from a local reporter, hands folded in her lap, posture rigid but softened by the tissue in her hand, monogrammed and perfectly placed. "I didn't know she was my sister," she said, voice cracking. "I never would have treated her like that if I'd known." I watched, still as stone. "She was dressed casually," Darlene continued. "I thought she was just a walk-up passenger. It was a misunderstanding, a policy I didn't make." A misunderstanding. It wasn't rage that rose in me. It was fatigue, the kind that seeps into your bones when someone lies with such polish, such practiced ease. You wonder if they actually believe it themselves. I turned up the volume just slightly. The reporter nodded empathetically, as if Darlene were the victim. Overlay text flashed on the screen. "Veteran flight attendant speaks out after viral humiliation scandal." Comments scrolled across the live stream. "She's human. We all make mistakes." "This is cancel culture. She said she was sorry." "She didn't know. Why are people so cruel?" But one caught my eye. "She never cried for her sister. She cried for the camera." And that was it. That one line cracked something in me. Not from anger, but recognition. Because I'd seen her cry before, when she got caught spreading a rumor in high school and needed sympathy to dodge suspension. When she found out Grandpa had left me a box of handwritten letters, then turned around and said he'd always favored her. She'd cried at his funeral too, loudly, visibly, after hiding every single one of those letters from the rest of the family. Tears were her specialty. They didn't mean remorse. They meant defense, manipulation, mascara, and just the right amount of tremble. "She weaponizes guilt," I muttered to myself. "Dresses harm in mascara and a quiver in her voice." I scrolled back to the beginning of the video, watched her dab the corner of her eye again. Exact same timing, same hand, same pause before exhale. A performance. Nothing more. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the hum of the cafe buzz around me. A table of retirees debating the game last night, a young couple sharing one pair of earbuds, a server laughing too hard at a joke she'd clearly heard before. The world kept moving, even as mine reshaped. I checked my messages again, expecting more noise, but what I found was quieter. A direct message. No profile picture, no name. The text read, "You're not wrong." She cried when she buried my complaint too. I still have the original files. Want them? I stared at the screen for a few seconds, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed one word. Yes. By the next morning, I was already in Austin. The flight was early and uneventful, which felt like a small gift from the universe. I kept my headphones in the whole way. No music, just silence. My seatmate didn't ask questions. I didn't offer conversation. And when we landed, I didn't bother with a rental car. A company car was waiting at the curb. The driver didn't speak much. I appreciated that. When we pulled into the Tier 1 headquarters, I didn't hesitate. I walked through the glass front doors like I'd always belonged there. Because I did. Only this time, I wasn't walking in as someone hiding behind a title. I was walking in with receipts, with names, with proof. Ellery met me in the lobby. He looked tired, but steady. He handed me a visitor badge anyway, the kind that reads temp in red block letters. "Just optics," he said, raising an eyebrow. HR. I clipped it on. We took the elevator to the 6th floor. Conference room B. Neutral walls, long table, bottled water set out like offerings. 2 HR directors, 1 legal advisor, Ellery at the far end. No one said much. At exactly 11:32, the door opened. Darlene stepped in, 2 minutes late, full uniform, polished down to her posture, as if none of this had touched her, until she saw me. She paused mid-step. Her eyes darted from me to the badge on my chest, to Ellery, then back again. "You called this?" she asked, her tone tight but aiming for pleasant. I didn't blink. "No, the company did. I just provided the reason." She took her seat, smoothed her skirt, tilted her head like this was an HR training video. The compliance officer gestured toward me. "Ms. Trevors?" I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, unlocked the screen, looked straight at the man seated beside the speaker. "I was sent this yesterday," I said calmly. "I haven't edited it." I tapped play. Darlene's voice filled the room, crisp, confident, unmistakable. "Maribel? She's just dead weight. No one listens to her. Hell, no one even remembers she works here. Let her sit in first class if she wants to pretend." Silence followed. Not polite, not reflective, just sharp and wide, like an open wound in the center of the table. Darlene shifted in her chair. Her throat moved once, twice, but no sound came. Finally, the HR director leaned forward. "Ms. Penrose, did you say these words?" Darlene gave a half laugh, the kind she used at cocktail events when someone asked her something uncomfortable. "It was a private joke, out of context. I didn't know I was being recorded." "It wasn't a joke to me," I said, steady, "or to the people you've pushed out, or to the culture you cultivated." Ellery set a folder on the table with quiet precision. Printed screenshots, complaint records, incident reports, names. He opened it, flipping slowly. "We have statements from at least 6 employees," he said, "some dating back 3 years. Multiple passengers, redirection of assignments based on appearance, internal memos that match your language nearly verbatim." Darlene reached for the water bottle, unscrewed the cap, didn't drink it. "This is no longer about sibling rivalry," Ellery said. "This is about workplace discrimination, documented." She stared at the table. Legal cleared his throat. "We're moving forward with a formal suspension pending ethics review." I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw her mouth open, ready to respond, to cry, to craft a new version. Then close again. She had no script left. We didn't leave the room immediately after the announcement. Nobody did. There was that strange, tense stillness in the air, the kind that settles after something breaks, but before anyone decides who's going to clean it up. Darlene sat, hands folded, eyes lowered. No protest. No performance. Just silence. I walked out without a glance back. Ellery caught up with me 2 floors down in the executive hallway, just as I passed the glass-walled strategy suite. He didn't speak right away, just walked beside me like a colleague who knew when to let gravity speak first. Then, finally, he held up his phone. "Take a look," he said. "It just hit my inbox. You'll want to see this." The subject line, "Urgent, Tier 1, Image Management Center, Strategic Liaison, Sato Holdings, Japan." Ellery tapped the message open and handed me the phone. The body of the email was short, precise, surgical. "Given recent events and leaked internal policies related to staff appearance-based discrimination, Sato Holdings is currently reassessing all brand alignment with Tier 1 airlines. Your internal culture has become our external liability." That word stuck. Liability. It had taken less than 48 hours for something Darlene built over a decade to unravel. Not because of morality, because of optics. Back upstairs, the executive meeting was already forming. No press, no recordings. Just board members and department heads around a curved table that looked more like a dinner party than a crisis response. But no one looked relaxed. The CFO went first, voice low but sharp. If Sato Holdings pulls out, we're looking at a loss of 22% in Asia-Pacific routes. Immediate. Another exec chimed in, fingers tapping a tablet. We've had warnings before. We chose to ignore them. Ellery and I exchanged a glance. I stayed quiet a moment longer. Then I stood. I'm not here to gloat, I began, eyes steady. I'm here to make sure we stop bleeding from a wound we pretended didn't exist. No one interrupted me. This isn't just about one person, I continued. We let a culture grow that prioritized image over people. We measured professionalism by polish. And when employees were moved, dismissed, reassigned, it wasn't to fix systems, it was to protect branding. I laid out my proposal. They do now. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a certificate, lifetime upgrade access on any Tier 1 flight. No expiration, no blackout dates, and a personal note from the board. She stared at it for a few seconds before looking back at me. I didn't fight back then, she said, her voice catching. But you did. I didn't need you to post about it, I told her. I just needed you to heal. She didn't cry. She just folded the certificate slowly, like it was delicate and sacred. As I stepped out onto the sidewalk, a breeze cut through the afternoon sun. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't anonymous. Voicemail, from corporate legal. I pressed play. Maribel, Darlene's hearing is scheduled for Friday morning. You're invited. I stared out across the street as traffic rolled by, steady and unbothered. She would walk in late, just like always. But this time, no one would stand for her. Friday morning arrived like a held breath. The kind of morning that felt quieter than it should have. No birdsong, no honking horns, just an overcast sky, a faint drizzle tapping on the glass as I sipped coffee in the lobby of Tier 1 headquarters. The elevator dinged, and I rose without checking my watch. I didn't need to. The hearing had been scheduled for 10 sharp, and I had no intention of being even 1 minute behind it. The hearing room was tucked behind double wood-paneled doors on the 5th floor, an unmarked space, no windows, no signage. Inside, 6 board members sat spaced evenly along one side of a long lacquered table. A legal counsel, 1 HR rep. Ellery sat at the far end, calm, collected. I took my seat across from them. No one smiled, no one offered pleasantries. And then, at 10:04, the door creaked open. She walked in, not rushed, but late. Intentional. Darlene wore a navy blazer, blouse too crisp, pants tailored but slightly wrinkled at the knees. No wings pinned to her lapel. No name tag. Just a face that used to control a room and now barely registered. She glanced around, pausing for acknowledgement that didn't come. Not from me. Not from anyone. For once, I thought, the room wasn't built around her. She took the only remaining chair, farthest from the center, cleared her throat gently as if prepping a presentation, then folded her hands in her lap. The chair of the board began. The review was methodical, nothing theatrical, just a steady reading of findings, emails, audio recordings, passenger complaints, ethics violations, every red flag that had been buried until the flood exposed them. There were moments when Darlene's lips parted, like she might object or explain. But nothing came. Maybe she realized it wasn't her script to rewrite this time. Then it was my turn. Ms. Trevors, the chair said, would you like to speak before the board delivers its ruling? I looked down at the notepad in front of me. I had written something the night before. Half a page, sharp, factual, measured. But now I simply closed the pad. No, I said. Everything's already been said, just not heard, until now. A beat passed. Then the ruling came. Darlene Penrose. Terminated. License permanently revoked. Not eligible for rehire within the aviation network. She blinked rapidly, swallowed hard, but she didn't cry. And that, I realized, was the truest thing she'd done in years. When the session ended, we filed out without ceremony. No handshakes, no cameras. Just a slow procession of people who had seen too much and finally acted. Outside the room, the hallway echoed with the click of heels and the rustle of briefcases. I kept walking. There was no applause waiting, no warm validation, just a quiet I had earned. Justice, I thought, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it signs papers, closes folders, and moves on. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like I had stepped out of a storm and wasn't dripping anymore. Weeks later, I boarded a flight. Different route, same airline. This time, the crew greeted me kindly, not because they knew me, but because they treated every passenger like they belonged. I sat in first class, not out of defiance, but because it was my seat. Window 1A. The attendant offered me water with a smile. No tension, no scan, no pause. "Thank you," I said softly. Not because I needed to be polite, but because I meant it. And as I looked out the window at the runway stretching ahead, I whispered to myself, I didn't take this seat to prove anything. I took it because I belonged. And always did.